T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris, this shit's sick.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris, this shit's sick.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. Glad that you guys are joining me on today's episode. We got a really good one in store for you guys. What teams are going to have the most explosive offenses this upcoming NFL season? I'm going to be ranking my top 10 best offenses for this year. I got some red flags about the Dallas Cowboys, man. If you are a fan of America's team, you should be really concerned going into this year. Why I believe Bryce Young is going to be in for a breakout season with the Panthers. Kansas City has won back-to-back Super Bowls. With a third straight, they could officially cement themselves as a dynasty. What are their chances of being able to pull that off, though? Oregon's top donor, Phil Knight, the former CEO of Nike, is giving them the blessing of receiving unlimited NIL money. I got some really interesting thoughts on that. What's Florida's potential this year? Could they overachieve? How could they shock us all? Nobody, in my opinion, is going to be able to stop Ohio State's rushing attack. Texas is entering their first year of SEC play. Could they be exposed? And what are the breakout quarterbacks that you need to know about in the SEC for this season? Before we get into it, shout out to everybody that's tuned in live on X, on YouTube, wherever you're listening to check out the JT Sports Podcast, wherever you get your podcast from. Past episodes of JT Sports Live are available in audio format. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, the JT Sports Podcast and JT Sports Live is available. We have all episodes available on those platforms, so go ahead, check us out, give us a 5-star review. If you have a question that you would like answered for our mailbag episode that we're going to be doing this weekend, you can send your questions in the DMs on Instagram at JT_Sports_ or on X at JT___. If you would like your question to be answered on our upcoming mailbag episode this weekend, send your questions in on Instagram and on X. Glad that everybody's tuned in, man. I got to take a quick sip of water before we get into it. All right, man. So here we go. Revealed it too soon. What offenses in the NFL this year are going to be the most explosive? I want to give you guys my projection for the NFL's top 10 most explosive offenses going into this season. At number 10, I got the Miami Dolphins. This is the fastest team in the league. You got Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Devon A-Chain. There's just speed all over the place with Miami. And although they did struggle in big games last season, this was an offense that scored over 30 points per game against non-playoff teams. That average dropped to only 13 points per game when they went up against teams that had a record of 500 or better. So that's the reasoning for why I have them rated so low at number 10. Their offensive line also took a little bit of a hit. They lost a good amount of talent on the interior of that unit, and I don't know if that offensive line is going to play that good this year. The O-line hasn't played good for Miami the last couple of years, which is why they come in at 10 for me. I still believe that this is going to be an offense that is going to be predicated off timing, getting the ball out of Tua's hands fast, and letting Tyreek and Jalen Waddle work in the open field. And if Devon A-Chain could stay healthy along with Raheem Mostert, you're going to have a really fast offense that's going to be really deadly this year. I was really hyped for Devon A-Chain last year, and I was really disappointed when he got injured because I had him on most of my fantasy squads. So Miami comes in at number 10 for me. The Chicago Bears, I have at number 9. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but if Caleb Williams ends up being as good as what he's been hyped up to be coming out of college, you mean to tell me that you can't see Chicago's offense being in the top 10? Look at that receiving core. That's without a doubt the best wideout room in the NFL going into this year. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze. And then you also have Cole come in at tight end. Come on, man. Nobody should be able to slow down Chicago's passing game this year if Caleb Williams is able to deliver and live up to the hype. There's way too many weapons around Caleb for him to struggle this year. This is going to be an offense that's going to be pick your poison. They're going to be able to shred you through the air, or they can kill you on the ground because you got DeAndre Swift, and Caleb Williams, he's a really good runner as well. He's way more athletic than what people give him credit for. The dude isn't small. He's pretty well built. He's pretty thick. No diddy. And he also has the ability to run through guys. He also can make you miss with his elusiveness in the open field. You got Shane Waldron as your new offensive coordinator replacing Luke Getsy. Shane Waldron, he was the OC for the past couple of years down in Seattle, and he ran an offense that I think complements Caleb Williams' skill set perfectly. It revolves around doing a lot of improvisation outside the pocket, extending plays, making big throws downfield. Chicago's offense is incredibly underrated going into this year, and I have them 9th on my list of top 10 offenses for this season. 8, I got Kansas City. Okay, Kansas City's offense regressed a little bit last year. It wasn't as explosive as what we've seen in years past. They were more of a short, methodical passing attack compared to taking a lot of deep shots downfield in years prior. But this year, you got Xavier Worthy, you signed Hollywood Brown in free agency. You have two elite deep threats on the outside. And I know we haven't seen Xavier Worthy play an NFL game yet to claim he's an elite deep threat. But anytime you break the NFL combine record, you automatically become an elite deep threat right out the gate. Because with that kind of speed, we saw what Andy Reid was able to do with Tyreek Hill. And then you pair him alongside of Hollywood Brown, who also has boosters underneath his cleats as well. You're going to see a more explosive offense out of Kansas City this season than what you saw in 2023. Last season, they were just trying to do what they had to do to score points. This year, though, they should be able to get way more big plays in the vertical passing game than what we saw in last year's season, because they didn't have too many wide receivers that were good at creating separation and getting a lot of plays downfield. Like, you have some big plays here and there. Like, Mahomes made some big throws to MVS from time to time occasionally, but you're going to see way more consistency with the big chunks that this offense is going to generate. And plus, you also are going to have an improved offensive line. You drafted a really good rookie tackle out of BYU. So I think Kansas City's offense is going to shake back in a major way this year. I have them 8th on this list. Now, next up, I got the 49ers coming in at number 7. Their offense is always a safe bet to be explosive, but you add Ricky Pearsall from this past year's draft. I was really high on him. This is somebody that has the ability to be a really good number 1 wide receiver in this league. Good explosiveness. He's really shifty, has really good suddenness with his footwork, and he's an incredible route runner and separator. For the 49ers to have Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Jawan Jennings, and then you add Ricky Pearsall, this is an underrated group of wide receivers. Ricky Pearsall, if his number does get called a good amount this year, he could have a stellar rookie season. You still have CMC there. We know about George Kittle. So with all the weapons that the 49ers have at their disposal, you got Kyle Shanahan calling plays. You know, this is definitely an offense that should still be amongst the best when it comes to their ability to generate explosive plays offensively. Detroit, I have at number 6. A lot of y'all probably are going to make the argument that they should be a lot higher because you got Jahmyr Gibbs coming into year 2. He could be poised for maybe a potential all-pro season. You got Sam Laporta. Jameson Williams could have a nice year, but I'm not convinced on Jameson Williams yet. You know, I still need to see a lot more out of him before I can say that, yeah, he's going to have a big role in Detroit's offense, because the Jameson Williams hype has been going on for the last couple of all seasons, and we've yet to see anything translate on the field besides a couple of splash plays here and there. Is this really going to be the year that Jameson Williams can put it all together and produce a good season for the Lions? I'm 2BD on that. But for the most part, with their offensive coordinator coming back, having a great offensive line, Jared Goff, and what he has to work with Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta and Gibbs, I definitely expect for Detroit's offense to still be amongst the NFL's most explosive. They come in at number 6 for me. Now we're getting into the top 5. This is where I'm going to cause a lot of divisiveness in the comment section. I just know it. The Green Bay Packers. This offense is not getting enough attention as it deserves, man. You have a great group of wide receivers. You don't have anybody in that wide receiver room that's elite, but you have a lot of guys who can give you solid to above average play. You can rotate guys in and out. There's just so much depth at that wide receiver position for Green Bay that it's impossible to see Jordan Love having a slump. The way he ended the second half of last season was nothing short of amazing, especially his performance in the postseason when they put belt to ass on the Dallas Cowboys. And there was a point during that 49ers game where, be honest, even if you're a 49ers fan, you probably thought that the Packers were going to end up going to the NFC Championship game, because up until the final moments of the fourth quarter, Green Bay was in the driver's seat for that game. With Jordan Love going into his second season starting for Green Bay, I think that the sky's the limit for this dude. He could not only win MVP, but maybe he could get Green Bay back to the promised land. Plus, you know that they got a really good offensive line with really good depth. You just added Josh Jacobs, who's going to be an upgrade from Aaron Jones. This is going to be a really effective, efficient, and potent offense for real. I think when you talk about the Green Bay Packers walking into this year, the Philadelphia Eagles come in at number 4 for me. This offense last year was a major disappointment. Once we got into the middle portion of the season, things started to go off the rails. With Kellen Moore being your new play caller, this is going to be a way better offense than what we saw last season. Jalen Hurts should bounce back. Is he going to be as good as what we saw in 2022? I don't know about that, but I definitely expect him to play at a top 10 level. You got A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, one of the best receiving duos in the league. We know that A.J. Brown at one point earlier last year was an MVP candidate with the kind of monster numbers that he was putting up. This offensive line is going to take a little bit of a hit, losing Jason Kelce to retirement, but they have a really good replacement in place for him. You add Saquon Barkley, who is going to be one of the biggest impact free agency signings this year. The fact that the Giants let him fall right into Philly's hands, I don't know how they allowed that to happen, man. If that was going to be the case, they should have just traded him away, because all you allow Philadelphia to do is continue to make their offense more overpowered than what it already is, man. You already had arguably a top 3, top 5 wide receiver in A.J. Brown. Devonta Smith is a top 15 receiver, depending on who you ask, maybe better, with a top 10 offensive line, which Saquon has never had during his time in New York. You mean to tell me that Philly's offense isn't going to be up there this year? I'll be really surprised if Philadelphia doesn't produce top 5 offensive numbers this year. Everywhere that Kellen Moore has been, his offenses have been pretty good. The run game has been a little lackluster from him as of late, but offensively, in terms of what you want out of your passing attack, being able to generate those big plays vertically downfield, he's a perfect fit for what Philadelphia has in place on this side of the football. So they come in at number 4. At number 3, I got the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore had pretty much the best offense in the NFL last season. There wasn't anything that they couldn't do. They could do anything they wanted to do against opposing defenses. With Lamar Jackson's ability to not just improvise and make big explosive plays on the ground with his legs, but also his ability to do it throwing the football, we're going to see that elevated to a different level this season, because he enters his second year under Todd Monken. They're going to be rolling out some new things. You're going to have Zay Flowers going into year 2. He could be in for a breakout year himself. And you got a lot of depth at tight end with Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews. The only question with Baltimore is, how good is their offensive line going to be, because they only returned 2 starters from last year's unit. You got Derrick Henry now. Now, at this point for Baltimore, you got to keep asking yourself, when are you ever going to be able to get over the hump? Because this offense is going to produce some really scary performances against a lot of the teams they're going to play this year, because how can you stop an offense that has a quarterback that can do everything? Even when you think you have Lamar Jackson bottled up, he still finds a way to make things happen. And now you have to worry about that monster truck at running back and King Henry. Yeah, good luck stopping Baltimore this year. At number 2, I got the Los Angeles Rams, man. They have a lot of riches coming into this season. You got Puka Nacua, who had one of the greatest rookie seasons that I've ever been alive to witness. Cooper Kupp. I mean, you got Kyron Williams, who had a breakout season. And then you drafted Blake Corum, who I also think we're going to hear his number called a good amount of as well due to Kyron Williams' durability concerns. And you still return a pretty good offensive line. And you got one of the best play callers in NFL history in Sean McVay. I could see the Rams making it to the NFC Championship game this year, mainly because how good their offense is going to be. Their offense was really good last season. But imagine the damage that they're going to do this year now that you could potentially have a good 1-2 punch at running back. When Kyron Williams got injured, the production of this offense dipped a little bit. But when he came back, they were averaging nearly 30 points per game. So the Rams come in at number 2 for me. And at number 1, oh, you guys are about to love this one. I know everybody's about to agree with this one. I got the Houston Texans, man. The Houston Texans have the best receiving core in the NFL. Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, these are 2 of the best route runners in the game. And you allow them to be on the same team with each other, yeah, one of these dudes is going to be open every single play. And then you got Nico Collins to take the top off the defense when C.J. Stroud wants to push the football vertically. You traded for Joe Mixon too. If Houston's offensive line takes a step up this year, this is going to be an offense that's going to be damn near unstoppable to get off the field. Or they're going to be damn near unstoppable because their offensive line was not good last year. They had a lot of injuries. If that becomes an average or better unit, I don't see how C.J. Stroud couldn't win MVP this year because the talent at wide receiver is too good for him not to produce at a high level when you have guys and Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell who just get open and create separation with ease. So there's a lot of talent for him to work with this year. I have him as my front runner to win the most valuable player award this season. And I think that Houston's offense is going to be really deadly going into the 2024 NFL season. So this is my list of the NFL's 10 most explosive offenses going into this year. I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a lot of agreement about these rankings in the comment section below. Let me know what team is rated too high, who's too low, who shouldn't be on the list, and who got left off the list that should be on here. Shout out to everybody in the chat, man. My guy Daryl Turner says, hey, JT, my guy, can we get some Texas A&M and Boise State some love because people are sleeping on them both in 2024 and 2025. Oh, yeah, I got you, Daryl Turner, man. Like, we got some Texas A&M stuff coming out, and we're going to get to the G5 later on during this offseason. Shout out to my boy Glock. He says that boy JT Fire been grinding for real. Damn, hell yeah. Hell yeah. If you're listening on YouTube and X, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we aren't just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our other ones in audio format on all podcasting platforms. Follow us and submit your college football and NFL questions on Instagram at JT_Sports_ and on X at JT___ to be featured in our mailbag episode that we're going to be recording this upcoming weekend. Now let's move on to this. You should be really concerned if you're a fan of the Dallas Cowboys going into this year, man, because there's a strong possibility that America's team could not be included in the postseason once this year comes to an end. I got some major red flags about Dallas going into this season. You got the brewing tensions between Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones, which doesn't surprise anybody. Because when Mike McCarthy got hired, we all knew that he was only brought in to be Jerry Jones' puppet. And when he first arrived in the Big D, you know, he was forced to keep Kellen Moore, and then eventually he got rid of him, and the offense didn't really look too different from what we saw compared to Kellen Moore calling the plays, right? So you tried to scapegoat Kellen Moore and say he was the problem. You get rid of him and you still keep coming up short in the postseason. And it's understandable why both parties are frustrated. If you're Mike McCarthy, you're saying, hey, Jerry, like, why are you always bringing so much unnecessary attention? You got your owner doing media runs saying how, they potentially could be doing some business with Bill Belichick down the road, but yet you still have Big Mike employed. But if you're Jerry Jones, you're looking at Big Mike McCarthy and you're saying, hey, bro, like, when are we ever going to be able to get over the hump? Our team is as talented as it's ever been, but yet we still can't get no further than the second round of the postseason. And I think this year is really going to start to magnify those tensions between Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones, because there was some rumblings that maybe they could go after Bill Belichick, and he definitely is going to be in the running for this job next season if things go left. And plus, with Dallas losing so much talent in free agency, a lot of depth pieces followed Dan Quinn to Washington. You got contract concerns with CeeDee Lamb, Michael Parsons, and Dak Prescott. There's just a lot of distractions with Dallas, more than usual, around this time this year. We know that Dallas always makes headlines, but they have way too many things going on for me to believe that they're truly locked in. If you're going to be a playoff team, everybody has to be goal-oriented on the same thing. Everybody has to be one team, one goal, and it just doesn't seem like that going into this year for Dallas. And they played 8 playoff teams from last season. They weren't really that great against teams that had winning records. Now, they did beat the Detroit Lions and whatnot, and they did have a good game against the Philadelphia Eagles in between there, but I just don't trust Dallas anytime they have to play games that are in prime time against playoff caliber opponents. And with them facing against 8 of them this year, I really think they're going to struggle. And then once we get to the roster side of things, their run game could be really terrible this year. I mean, they don't have any good running backs on that squad. You brought back Ezekiel Elliott, which, Zeke is really good in short yardage, goal line situations when you need to get somebody to punch the block in from close. But outside of that, Ezekiel Elliott is a shell of what he used to be. He's not explosive anymore. He doesn't have that same breakaway speed that he once used to have in his prime. Just bringing back Ezekiel Elliott showcases why this rushing attack is in huge trouble this year. Now, maybe Rico has a breakout year and we see more of Deuce Vaughn, but I just don't see it with this rushing attack this year. I think that Dallas run game is in serious trouble. Plus, their offensive line got worse. You lost Tyron Smith in free agency. Tyler Biadasz is gone as well. Now, I get that when it comes to losing Tyron Smith, you can't really call that a loss because the dude is injured nearly every single season. He hasn't played a full season since 9 years ago. But their offensive line just overall doesn't look as great as what it has in previous years. Like for the last 6 years or so, Dallas has always had a top 10 offensive line. They don't have that this year. They have a really questionable offensive line. You got questions at right tackle. We don't know how good this rookie offensive tackle that you drafted is going to be right out the gate. So offensively, with their offensive line being a question mark, not having any proven running backs on their team that look like they can give you serviceable play, I just don't see it with this offense this year. You're going to be able to throw the football, but you got to be able to play complementary football. And we've seen what Dak Prescott does when you have to overly rely on him too much. Defensively, I think your defense is also going to regress. You replace Dan Quinn with Mike Zimmer. Mike Zimmer, when you just think of the name, you believe, oh yeah, like you're tripping, JT. Our defense is still going to be good. We may have a small drop off from what we had and Dan Quinn calling the plays with Mike Zimmer, and that's a fair point. But when you look at Mike Zimmer's defenses in Minnesota, his last 2 years there, they ranked near the bottom of the NFL in every statistical category. They couldn't stop the pass. They couldn't get off the field in third down situations. They were bad against the run. I mean, there was really no positives about the Vikings defense their final 2 years under Coach Zimmer. And with you hiring him to be your play caller, replacing Dan Quinn, who did an outstanding job for you the last couple of years, that defense, despite the amount of talent that they have, they're going to be underutilized because it's not like Mike Zimmer never had talent in Minnesota on defense. The talent definitely was there. It's just that, over time, how good of a mastermind he was on defense started to kind of, decline over the years. And I just see Mike Zimmer as a coach who is good to have on your staff as an assistant or an analyst, maybe a consultant, but to ask him to call plays for you, I just think was a big mistake on Dallas' behalf because those defenses in Minnesota weren't looking good. Even when Dan Quinn, got fired by Atlanta, his defenses weren't completely shit. They weren't ranking in the bottom of every stat defensively, but you look at Mike Zimmer on the other hand, and I got to say, man, I don't know about you, dog. I don't know about you. And overall, Dallas, to me, doesn't look like a playoff team. This is a team that has way too much going on internally. They got so many distractions. You got a defensive coordinator that's going to be a downgrade from you having the best defensive coordinator in the game the last couple of years. Your offensive line isn't going to be as good as what it used to be. You're going to have a really inconsistent rushing attack. I just have too many red flags going into this year for Dallas for me to have faith that this is going to be a playoff team. Bryce Young this season has a lot of weight on his shoulders, man. It's a make or break year for him. He either has to show up or get replaced by the end of the season. Is he going to be able to live up to the expectations that comes with being the first overall pick? Because remember, Carolina gave up the farm to get this dude. They traded away DJ Moore and a few other draft picks. Bryce Young with new head coach Dave Canales, I think that we're going to see him have a breakout season this year. Okay, and I look at his rookie season as a throwaway year. I'm tired of Panthers fans coming at me saying, oh, JT, well, he held the ball too long. He didn't have a lot of athleticism, bro. I don't give a shit. I really don't. The dude had a terrible roster, man. I watched Carolina play Jacksonville live in person, and he was running for his life every play. There were receivers that were getting jammed to hell, getting pressed to the sidelines. Like, listen, I'm tired of people trying to hold Bryce Young's rookie year against him and trying to ignore the fact that Carolina just completely sucked, okay? Now, going into his second year, he finally has a supporting cast that he's going to be able to have a good season. Okay, this is going to be a supporting cast that is going to be able to help Bryce Young take that big leap in his second year. Deontay Johnson is a really good route runner. He was really underrated during his time in Pittsburgh and really overhated. He's not a locker room issue. The dude just wants to make plays, and that's what Bryce Young is going to give him the chance to do. Deontay Johnson is the kind of wide receiver that is going to be a perfect fit for what Dave Canales wants to do offensively. Dave Canales' offense is all about timing, getting the ball out fast. That's what Bryce Young should do a good job of this year, because when he was coming out of Alabama, what he did well was that he was a really good processor. He was able to read the defenses, figure out what they were doing, and figure out how to attack them. And he was also considered a point guard, according to Nick Saban. He was a good distributor. He knew how to spread the wealth. For a quarterback like Bryce Young to be effective that doesn't have a strong arm, you got to have guys who can create separation and can do it at a snap of a finger. That's what Deontay Johnson can do. He's one of the best route runners in the game. The only question about Diontae Johnson is, can you trust him late in games to come down with clutch catches? Because drops have been an issue that have played Diontae Johnson the last couple of years, but it's not like this dude is dropping every pass that gets thrown his way. If you're only dropping 8-9 catches out of 90 to 100 and something targets, I don't really think that's all that bad. Diontae Johnson is going to be really good with Bryce Young this year. Bryce Young also is going to have Jonathan Brooks in the backfield along with Chuba Hubbard. So you're going to have a way better run game. You drafted Xavier Legette. With what Bryce Young has around him this year, he now has a fair chance to show us how good he actually can be, because we didn't really get to see that last year. And I get that. When you get drafted as high as what Bryce Young did, you're expected to overcome certain limitations. But you can't overcome a completely dog shit situation like what Bryce Young had. The offensive line couldn't block nobody. Wide receivers couldn't get open. And when they did, they were dropping passes. It just wasn't a good situation for Bryce to succeed in. But with Dave Canales replacing Frank Wright, somebody who has done a really good job of helping Baker Mayfield resurrect his career. He had Geno Smith balling his one season when he wasn't riding anybody back and he was an MVP candidate. You know, you saw how Geno Smith somewhat regressed last season once Dave Canales left, and you could see the same thing happening with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What does that tell you? That tells you that, hey, Dave Canales, although he didn't get a lot of head coaching interviews and he doesn't have a lot of experience being an OC or a play caller in general, this dude knows how to get good quarterback play. He knows how to speak to quarterbacks. And with you having a guy in Dave Canales that's going to run a scheme that's better suited for Bryce Young's strengths, that's going to help maximize Bryce Young's talent. Similar to the Miami Dolphins when they got rid of Brian Flores and they replaced him with Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel ran a West Coast system that was based off the Kyle Shanahan offense, which he got a lot of influence from because he was on that staff, and you gave him Tua Tagovailoa, who was a quarterback that, like Bryce Young, didn't have the strongest arm, but he was really good when it came to throwing the ball with accuracy, in between the numbers, getting the ball out fast, taking care of the football. I see Bryce Young having a Trevor Lawrence and Tua Tagovailoa kind of ascension in his second season, as long as Dave Canales is as good as a offensive mind as we believe him to be based on what he's done with Seattle and with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I believe Bryce Young is going to have a really strong second year in the NFL. I believe this is going to be his coming out party, and this is going to be the year that we see Bryce Young show us all why he was drafted number 1 overall by Carolina. I think he's going to have a breakout season. Kansas City has won back-to-back Super Bowls. If they win their third one this season, they cement themselves as an official dynasty. Is it going to happen? You know, it's going to be really tough for Kansas City because you got Jim Harbaugh entering the AFC West now. He's going to make things interesting for you. But overall, you got to feel really confident about Kansas City's ability to win the AFC West. So you know that you're going to be a lock to have a home field playoff game. The question is, how far in the postseason is Kansas City going to go this year? Because you've been to the AFC Championship pretty much every single year under the Mahomes, Andy Reid regime. But with Joe Burrow and Lamar having a better supporting cast, especially Joe Burrow having Jermaine Burton at wide receiver and an improved offensive line, him being fully healthy, he could stop you once again. And we know Kansas City fans get a little bit shook when they hear the name Joe Burrow because every time he comes to Arrowhead, it turns into Burrowhead. KC, though, you know, they have a counterpunch. Although Cincy and the Baltimore Ravens got better, they did too, because last year, offensively, Kansas City was tough to watch at times, especially if you remember their awful performance against the Raiders on Christmas Day. How did their offense get better this offseason? Well, you add big play threats, Hollywood Brown in free agency, and you drafted Xavier Worthy in the first round of this past year's draft to set the NFL Combine record. With the kind of speed that these guys bring to the Chiefs offense, you're going to see an offense that's going to be way more consistent at generating explosive plays and chunks. We didn't really see a lot of big plays that were 30, 40 yards down the field from this offense as much as what we've seen in previous years when they used to have Tyreek Hill. Well, now that you have that kind of speed that Tyreek Hill used to have in this offense with Xavier Worthy, now that's going to help you get that deep passing game to open up again. And with that deep passing game opening up again, that's going to make defenses have to play a little bit further back, and you can still have success that you had last year with Mahomes just getting the ball out fast and being good at running a West Coast style offense, because that's pretty much what Kansas City was running last year due to their wide receivers' lack of ability to get open and create separation downfield. And plus, their offensive line at times wasn't the best. Well, their offensive line also improved as well. They drafted a really good offensive tackle out of BYU. You got Jawan Taylor, who he's always been an up and down player. When they signed him to that massive contract in free agency last year, I kind of was like, man, I don't know about that one, but he's always been a player that'll have a down year one season, and then the next year, he'll end up bouncing back and playing at a high level. You're really good when it comes to your offensive guard positions. So your offense is going to be not only more efficient, but they're going to give you better trench play from what you're going to get out of your offensive line this season, which also should help out Isaiah Pacheco, who is a really good back, and it's also going to give Mahomes way more time to throw the football downfield, because now he's going to have more time for those big plays to open up. And of course, we can't forget about Mr. Swifty and Travis Kelce. Almost called him Taylor Swift. So offensively, I think that Kansas City has what it takes this year to be able to three-peat. They're also going to generate less turnovers this year, because Mahomes was kind of turning the football over a good amount last year, trying to make things happen. They rate 24th in turnovers last season. I expect that to go down. I expect this to be a better offense when it comes to being able to hold on to the pick and not giving opposing teams extra possessions. And then defensively, with Steve Spagnuolo, who pretty much is regarded as the best big game DC in NFL history, you're still going to have a great unit. Yes, you did lose L'Jarius Sneed, but you drafted very well, especially at corner. So I don't think that this defense is going to have too big of a drop-off. It's always hard to maintain a top 3 or top 5 defense from a year-to-year basis, but you definitely can expect this defense to be no worse than a top 10, top 12 unit this year. And with what Kansas City has on both sides of the football, listen, as much as I would hate to see Kansas City win this thing again, if I was a betting man and you were to ask me, JT, you got $1,000, but you got to use it to bet on who you think is going to win it all, how could I not put it on Kansas City? I mean, at this point, there's only been one quarterback who's been able to stop Patrick Mahomes, and that's been Joe Burrow. And we've seen Joe Burrow lose to Patrick Mahomes right after that, the following season. So there's not really a QB who you can look at and say, oh, yeah, I trust him to beat Patrick Mahomes. Because when you play against Kansas City, you have to be able to show up in the fourth quarter. And Kansas City, with the game on the line, you know that they're always going to make the plays necessary to win. The problem is the teams that they play don't do a good job of that. It's like they'll play well for the first 3 quarters, and all of a sudden, the final 6 minutes of the game get here, money time, nobody's able to deliver. But Kansas City on the other sidelines, though, that seems to bring the best out of them. So me personally, listen, I would pick Kansas City to win it all again this year, because I really don't trust the other quarterbacks out there. This is just a a well-operated, well-oiled machine that Andy Reid has going down there. And I think that we're really close to seeing Kansas City cement themselves officially in NFL history as a legitimate dynasty. Oregon's top donor, or start that over. Oregon has been blessed with unlimited NIL money from Phil Knight. Phil Knight, according to a report from ESPN, he wants his alma mater to win a championship before he ends up going away. He's 86 years old. He wants to see Oregon hoisting that championship gold, and he has no problem going out his wallet to do whatever it takes to get it done. So now it makes sense why Oregon has been killing it in the transfer portal and in recruiting. They pretty much are getting whoever they want. Anybody that's rated high in the transfer portal, you come on here. You get Evan Stewart. He was one of the best players from this transfer portal cycle, and they were in the running to get pretty much all of the top 10, top 25 transfer portal guys that they wanted. Even if those guys went to other schools, best believe Oregon was in their top 3. And every time I see one of these 5 or highly touted 4-star recruits post the top 5, it seems like Oregon is always included in it. For Oregon to receive unlimited NIL money definitely improves Dan Lanning's chances of being able to win a national title. He's kind of starting to get into that kind of territory where people are going to start calling him overrated for every year that he doesn't get it done. Similar to Kirby Smart at Georgia. Remember, there was a time when Kirby Smart was struggling to get over the hump, and people started to call him overrated and started to say, okay, like, is he going to be another Mark Richt? The win in this new era of college football, you gotta have the money to pay these players, man. I know that a lot of people hate what college football has turned into, but hey, man, this is just the new reality of college football. Everybody wanted these players to get paid, and everybody wanted these players to be able to transfer to whichever school they wanted to whenever they please. But yet, we're upset with the effect of, the NIL and transfer portal era, though. But this is what we all wanted. But even though the players are getting what they wanted and what we wanted them to get, we still aren't getting the desired outcome that we wanted. And what college football is turning into is what I've been saying for the last 2 years, is that it's the NFL just being played on Friday nights and Saturday afternoons. There's no difference anymore between what college football is and what the NFL is. They are the same entity pretty much. All right. You, at this point, may be reaching a territory where if you're the NCAA, it might be in your best interest to step in and impose a salary cap. Because when you have somebody like Phil Knight being your leading donor and he just has millions on top of millions to spend on you, it just makes it a little unfair for the rest of the schools out there in college football. Because what we thought initially is that allowing players to utilize the transfer portal and to get paid was going to create more parity in this sport. But that really hasn't happened, because what has transpired is that the teams that already were dominating continue to dominate more, because now it's not illegal anymore to pay these dudes out of high school. Now you can be like Tennessee and fly your quarterback out on a private jet for a recruiting visit. You could slide him a $500K advance, and be like, well, we're going to break off the rest once you get here. It's just, for Oregon to be getting these kinds of blessings, you definitely have to expect that they're going to win a national championship sooner rather than later. And for the Big Ten fanboys that keep saying that, Oregon is going to struggle making the transition from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, no, they are not. Oregon probably has the second best or the best resources up there with Ohio State. Either or. You can either make the argument for Ohio State or Oregon, but even then, I don't even think that Ohio State's pockets are as deep as what Oregon's is. Phil Knight has been going all out for Oregon for years. But it seems like now he's starting to buckle down and say, you know what? I really want to see us get it done. And I'm going to make sure I can do everything in my power to make sure that that happens. It's pretty much turning into pay to play for college football. Okay, if you don't have money to dish out for these highly touted guys out of high school or anybody in the portal, you're going to have a hard time getting them. There was somebody that made a statement, I believe he was the head coach of Boise State, that said, yeah, we're not in the market of paying guys out of high school that are unproven. It's like, I understand you, bro, but, you know, your stubbornness ain't going to win you anything no time soon, man. Listen, money runs the world, and it's running college football right now. Dan Lanning, he's on the clock to win the Natty. He has to do it soon, but I believe that is coming. I think that he's building Georgia on the West Coast, and I think that they're about to give the Big Ten a punch in the mouth this year for everybody struggling making that transition, because there aren't too many teams in the Big Ten that play great offense and great defense. And there's only been 3 teams in this conference that have mattered. So, listen, for Oregon to be getting unlimited NIL money should simply be unfair, man, because eventually it's going to end up paying off and them winning the Natty. And I hope they are able to do it before, you know, we end up having to say goodbye to Phil Knight. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to my guy, M Sparks. He says, sup, JT, Pittsburgh Steelers for life. He says, I don't think much will change. KC has defense and a much improved O-line. Robert Turner says, well said, well-oiled machine, true story. My guy, Chris Brady, Natty Shots, he says, Oregon plus 1,000, Ole Miss plus 1,600. If you're listening on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're new, remember that we aren't just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones in audio format on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you have a question that you would like to be answered on a future episode, you can submit them on Instagram at JT_Sports_ and on X at JT_Sports_. We're going to be recording a mailbag episode this weekend, so make sure that you send your questions in so they can get answered. A good amount of you guys have been asking about where my record predictions are for college football. They are on Instagram and TikTok. I am doing every Power 5 team's record prediction game by game in like a minute or a minute and 30-second shorts and reels on TikTok and Instagram. So if you want to see my college football record predictions before I drop them on here officially in about a week or two, you need to be following me on TikTok at JT_Sports_ or on Instagram at JT_Sports_. I've already done Colorado, Florida, and Texas A&M, and I'm about to get the Ole Miss in Missouri. So go ahead, follow me on Instagram and TikTok if you want to see my early game-by-game record predictions for, you know, your favorite team. And shout out to everybody in the chat. Let's continue on. Let's be honest. Unless you're a fan of Florida, you don't expect the Gators to do too much this year. Vegas has them with the over-under win total of 4.5. And Billy Napier, we already know about the story. His job is on the line. Florida has to win. And they got the toughest schedule in college football. But could Florida beat the odds and surprise us all this year and overachieve? Now, what is overachieving if you're Florida this season when the bar is set really low? I mean, if you win 5-6 games, that could be considered a reason to keep Billy Napier, right? For me, Florida overachieving would be them getting to 6 wins. And as crazy and insane as that sounds for a school like Florida that's rooted in so much tradition, you know, they got a pretty good team this year. And I've never been low on Florida because they've lacked talent. Okay, offensively, this could be the most underrated offense in the SEC walking into this season. They got a really deep wide receiver room. Eugene Wilson, Elijah Badger. They're going to end up being one of the best wide receiver duos in this conference. You got Chimere DK, who is a transfer from Wisconsin. He already has a good relationship with Graham Mertz because him and Graham Mertz were playing with each other up there in Wisconsin before he came down to Florida. You already know your rushing attack is going to be really effective. If Florida's offensive line can be solid or better, this is going to be a really deadly and potent offense. And it doesn't even matter if Billy Napier is calling the plays. It's hard for your offense to be average or below average if you have this much talent around you. Okay, with Graham Mertz, he's proven that he can be a really good quarterback. I don't think that he's mid or average. I think that he's really good. He's just not elite. He potentially could play at an elite level with the supporting cast that he has to throw to this season. Defensively, you got some talent there as well. You got some good depth pieces on the defensive line. Are you going to be able to get after the quarterback this year? We will see. But you got Joey Slackman, who is a transfer from Penn. He was Ivy League Defensive Player of the Year. He was one of the better interior defensive linemen in the portal. You also went heavy on improving your secondary in the portal as well. You got a dude named Aja Turner, who spent a few years starting for Washington. You put him in the back end of that secondary with Castell, who was a freshman All-American last year. Like, there's talent on Florida. The question is, can the coaching maximize this talent? Because that's been my only problem with Florida. People make it seem like, oh, you're just hating on Florida. You overlooking us having a top 5 portal class. You overlooking how well Billy Napier has recruited. It doesn't matter how much talent you have if you don't have the right coaching. We've seen this story with Texas A&M with Jimbo Fisher. But if Billy Napier actually ends up being the coach that Florida thought he would be when they hired him from Louisiana, I could see this being an 8-win team. Let's say the time management issues and the bad in-game decision-making go away spontaneously this year, then Florida definitely is good enough to win 8 games. Okay, the talent is there. In terms of talent, they are probably around like top 8, top 7 in the SEC, at least offensively. Defensively, they may not be good as what Tennessee, Kentucky, and some of the other schools are, but this is definitely a roster that would be an 8-win team if they had a coach like Kalen DeBoer or even Steve Sarkisian. Billy Napier this season is going to define if he deserves to be a Power 5 head coach or a Power 4 head coach, Because when you're coaching in the SEC, every week it seems like you're going up against a good team and everybody has a somewhat difficult schedule to a certain extent. So if you can't win 6 games this year, then what makes anybody think that you're going to be able to ever win 6 games with how difficult the SEC is going to be for the foreseeable future? This team, to me, should at least win 7, 8 games if Billy Napier is a good coach. I get that they got some really tough games. You got to play Texas on the road. You got to play Georgia. But from a talent standpoint, I don't think the gap is too far from them to pull off an upset on the road against Texas, or for them to beat a school like LSU, or to beat Florida State. For as tough as what the Gators schedule is this season, there definitely are a ton of winnable games. You could beat Miami week 1. And this is coming from a Miami Hurricane fan. Y'all call me biased, but I'm just being honest. I think that it's a 60% chance Miami wins and a 40% chance that Florida could end up pulling off the upset. Okay? You could beat UCF. You got a chance to beat Tennessee. You have had Tennessee's number in the past, and the talent is good enough to beat Tennessee. For Florida, I think the ceiling, if everything goes right for them this year, is 8 wins. 8-4. But the floor is really low. And the reason why I'm not high on Florida has nothing to do with them not having the talent. It has everything to do with Billy Napier. This is Billy's prove it year. 6 wins would be a little bit of a disappointment considering what Florida used to be when you think of the Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow days. But if he can get to 7 wins, that would be an overachievement to me. 6 wins, I wouldn't consider that being overachieving because you just barely met the mark. You did what you needed to do to keep your job and buy yourself another year. But 7, 8 wins, massive achievement for Billy Napier. And if that happens, he should win Coach of the Year. But normally, when you have a coach under this much pressure, that's on the hot seat, that refuses to give up what's been his biggest Achilles heel, he normally ends up having met his demise. And I think that's what's going to happen with Billy Napier. I think that him not giving up the play calling is going to be huge. But, the talent is there. They got a good quarterback. They got weapons around Graham Mertz. And the talent definitely is there on defense if they step up under Austin Armstrong. This is an 8-win team at best. But we will see if Florida can end up beating the odds and surprising us all this year. Oh, man. Whew. Man, Ohio State's rushing attack is going to be unstoppable this year. How is anybody going to be able to stop the best running back room in college football? How the hell did Ohio State end up getting college football's 2 best running backs on their squad and won? Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. Man, this ain't going to be fair. Both of these 2 guys are future first-round talents at the next level. Quinshon Judkins, his last 2 years at Ole Miss have been nothing short of outstanding. His freshman year, he went for 1,500 rushing yards, 16 touchdowns. He was averaging 5.7 yards per attempt. Last year, he had 15 touchdowns on the ground and still had 1,100 yards rushing too, right? Travion Henderson, his freshman year, he broke out on the scene. He had over 1,000 yards rushing. The problem with him is that he struggles to stay healthy. But last year, he was really effective when he was on the field. 11 touchdowns, averaging nearly 6 yards per carry. And with them having Chip Kelly calling the plays, that's going to make them even better. Because what people keep overlooking about Chip Kelly is that he's really good when it comes to maximizing great running backs. At UCLA, their last couple of years, their rushing attack has been really good when Chip Kelly was there. 2021, they were 10th in rushing yards per game, and they were 18th in yards per carry. 2022, right? They were 5th in the nation in rushing yards per game, and they led the country in yards per carry at 6 per attempt. And then last season, they had a little bit of a decline, but they still were a top half rushing attack in terms of where they were statistically. 30th in rushing yards per game. They were 44th in yards per carry at 4.5 per attempt. So with Chip Kelly being reunited with his former offensive line coach, you're going to see a rushing attack that's going to be just as dominant, or if not more dominant, than what we saw last year and years prior out of Michigan with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. If anything, this could be a better running back duo with Henderson and Judkins because they're more talented than what Edwards and Corum are. When Quinshon Judkins was coming out of high school, he was a little bit under-recruited, but when he was in the transfer portal, he was not only one of the best players in the portal, but he was the second best running back right behind Damian Martinez, in my opinion. And Travion Henderson, he's always been a top 5 running back in the nation, as long as he's been able to stay healthy. But let's say Travion Henderson struggles to stay healthy again this year, right? It's not really going to matter because you're still going to have Quinshon Judkins. You see, Ohio State's biggest question is going to be, who's going to start at running back for them? Because, they're so talented that you have to kind of alternate who starts every single week. If I was Ryan Day, I'd say, okay, this week, Quinshon Judkins starts. Next week, Travion Henderson will start. Hell, I don't even know how they're going to be able to split up the carries because both of these running backs are so good that it's hard to take them off the field with how productive they normally tend to be. And it's not every day that you get 2 first-round caliber running backs on your roster. Very few teams are able to have even elite running backs on their squad. And there are a lot of running backs that put up good numbers, but that's only because the amount of workload that they get. When you're getting like 250, 300 carries in the season, it's impossible for you not to put up good numbers. But the good or the best running backs are the ones who can be effective with the limited amount of touches. With Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, it's pick your poison. Ohio State's key to winning the national championship for me doesn't come down to how good Will Howard is. It comes down to how dominant Ohio State's going to be on the ground. And this should be the best rushing attack in college football this year. And this is going to be the main reason why they're going to turn the table on Michigan. Why has Michigan gotten the upper hand on Ohio State in previous years? Well, it's been because they've been the more dominant team up front. They've been more physical. Let's just be honest about this shit. Like, Michigan, every time they played Ohio State the last couple of years during this losing streak for the Buckeyes, they've taken away Ohio State's manhood, man. They've had their way up front. I think that changes this year because now Ryan Day can go into that game and they can say, you know what? If y'all want to run the ball 50 times, guess what? We can run the ball 50 times too because we got Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. Like, listen, there are games that Ohio State should play this year where they could run the ball 40, 50 straight times and still win in blowout fashion. That's how dominant this rushing attack should be. I get the concerns about the offensive line, but this is Ohio State. You people got to understand something. When you recruit as good as what the Buckeyes do, and you have access to the amount of NIL money that they do, you can't expect a certain weakness for a school like them to remain a weakness for a long period of time. Eventually, they're going to figure it out. And I think this is the year that they get it figured out. Listen, if you're not drinking that Ohio State Kool-Aid, I strongly encourage you to go ahead and get you some, man, because if they don't make it to the national championship this year, it's going to be a big-ass disappointment. Because with how good this team is and having 2 arguably of college football's best running backs on your squad, I mean, nobody should be able to stop Ohio State's rushing attack this year, man. Like, it's going to be better than what Michigan's was the past 2 seasons. Because Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson are way more talented than what Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum were. So I'm expecting big things out of Ohio State's ground game. When you have a great rushing attack, who cares how good your quarterback is, man? All Will Howard needs to do is be a good game manager, take care of the football, show up in big moments late when they need him to. And that's all he needs to do. He has a fairly easy job, man. Just hand the rock off 30, 50 times to Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson and let those boys go to work, man. I don't know how the hell Ohio State's team has gotten this stat. Well, I know how the hell it's gotten this stat because of NIL and the transfer portal. And everybody thought that this was going to create parity, right? Everybody thought that, when guys like Quinshon Judkins hit the portal, they were going to go to schools that will give them a bigger opportunity. But no, they end up chasing the bag and going to the school that ends up paying them the most money. And this is how you get the juggernaut that Ohio State is walking into the 2024 college football season. This is going to be college football's best rushing attack. If they don't have a top 5 rushing offense statistically at the end of this season, I would be really surprised because they have way too much talent at RB and on the offensive line for this ground game not to pummel and bully everybody that they play. Like, I don't think nobody's going to be able to stop Ohio State's ground and pound. Shout out to everybody in the chat, man. I got 2 more things that we got to get to before we end this episode. Shout out to my guy, Papi Guapo TV. He says, yo, what's up? My guy, Shadow Ben says, smash that like button, no diddy. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to my guy, TSO_JLF. He says, yo, what's good, my guy? Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Okay. Texas is officially a member of the SEC. How good are they going to be year one? Are they going to get humbled? Are they going to get exposed playing in a tougher conference? Because you're a long way from the Big 12 now. You're in big boy country now. You're playing in the best conference in college football. You don't get the luxury of getting free wins against Arizona State. Well, man, you got to rewind that one back, man. Run it back, man. Oh, about to say Ohio State again. Texas is going into their first season in the SEC. How good are they going to be? Are they going to get humbled? Are they going to get exposed? Because the Longhorns are a long way from the Big 12. You're not going to have the luxury of playing Kansas and Kansas State anymore. Like, you're going to be going up against Georgia, Alabama, some of the big boys of the sport. Are you ready? To me, I think Texas is. And if you think that Texas is about to get exposed because they're not ready for the SEC, like, I really have to question your knowledge of college football. And I don't say that to be ignorant. I say that because Texas has always been good enough to compete with any school they play up against. Okay, the resources, we know that those pockets run deep and those wallets are overflowing with money down there in Austin. Okay, they got money to blow and they're really passionate about football down there. It's always been easy to recruit at Texas. It's never been a problem to assemble a talented team down there. The problem has been their lack of good coaching. Well, that's been fixed when they made the decision to hire Steve Sarkisian a few years ago. And he's done an incredible job down there at not only managing the hype and the high expectations that comes with that job, but actually being able to get them, a few plays shy of the national championship last season. Texas also beat Alabama last year in Tuscaloosa, which, the people that are saying, Texas, they're not ready for the SEC. They ain't ready for the big boys. But they beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, a place that you rarely see Alabama lose at. Alabama has only had a handful of losses this past decade at home, and you can count them on both fingers. Texas already showed that they're good enough to compete with anybody in the SEC, any place, anytime. You want to line it up in the parking lot? Cool. Texas is going to be ready for you. And what they have going into this season isn't as good as a team as what they had last year, but they still are good enough to win the SEC championship. You know that this is going to be an efficient offense. They're going to be well balanced. They're going to be effective on the ground and through the air. They are going to have a top 10 offensive line coming into this year. They landed 2 really good wide receivers in the portal. Isaiah Bond was the number 1 ranked receiver from this past portal cycle. And Matthew Golden, who's a transfer from the University of Houston, he was a top 50 rated player from this portal cycle as well. So you got 2 really good wideouts at your disposal if you're Quinn Ewers, and you're going to have one of the nation's best offensive lines. He should put up Heisman-worthy numbers. And Quinn Ewers, to me, is the most overhated player in college football, not named Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders, I think that the hate for some of the things he does is justified. But for Quinn Ewers, this dude is always getting called overrated when he isn't a bad quarterback. And I think that most people agree. I think that most people will consider Quinn Ewers to be a good quarterback, but not a great quarterback. And that's why he gets so much hate, because he was one of the highest rated recruits coming out of high school in history, and he hasn't really lived up to that level of hype in college football. But that doesn't mean that the dude still isn't one of the better quarterbacks in the game. I still think that he's a top 10 quarterback, and there's been moments when he's looked highly efficient, when he's doing a good job of making good decisions and being accurate with his throws. He's really effective. And I think going into his final season down at Austin, we're going to see the best version of Quinn Ewers that we've yet to see. I feel he's gotten better every single season. Hell, he was good enough to get them to the playoffs. And yeah, they have to win a few games without him, but when he's on the field, they're a better team than what they are when he's not. Now, Arch Manning is sitting behind Quinn Ewers. I'm not expecting to see any quarterback controversy down there for the Longhorns. All right, I just think that people are a little bit over anxious, and that's another reason why people are hating on Quinn Ewers, because they're thinking about the potential that Arch Manning has. But I think that Quinn Ewers walking into the SEC is definitely one of the top 5 quarterbacks that we have in this conference in 2024. And I think that with what he has to work with around him, especially the talent that he has up front blocking for him, sets him up to have a Heisman caliber campaign this year, as long as he can live up to that level of expectation and he can hold up his end of the bargain. Defensively, it's definitely realistic to expect a little bit of a drop-off. Is this going to be a top 5, top 10 defense like we saw last year out of Texas? I strongly doubt it. Okay, it's going to be hard to find replacements for Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. But their run defense is going to regress. Their pass defense, though, should improve and take a major step forward. Everybody's been making a big fuss over, how much their secondary struggled at times last year. But they went really heavy in the transfer portal to improve that secondary. They also have a couple of true freshman guys who could compete for some early playing time, and they could make big impacts right away. So I think that defensively for Texas, you still have the talent in place where you should be a top 20, top 30 defense. And your defense is better than the majority of the defenses in the SEC walking into this year, because people make it seem like the SEC has been known for great defense the last couple of years. Like, that's what the SEC used to be in the early 2010s, but the SEC kind of has turned into what we used to know the Big 12 for being: all offense, no defense. Look at LSU, Ole Miss. There were so many teams last year that had awful defenses, but they were putting up points in bunches on offense. So I think that Texas, in terms of what they are year one in the SEC this year, they are a well-rounded team. They don't really have any glaring weaknesses that you look at and you say, oh, yeah, that's going to give them trouble. Do they have certain positions where they aren't as talented as compared to others? Yes, but for the most part, it's hard to really look at Texas and be like, oh, yeah, like, you played them, this is going to get exploited. They don't really have any significant holes. That's the luxury of being Steve Sarkisian. When you have holes, instead of having to rely on high school recruiting to fix them, you can go in the transfer portal, drop a bag, and immediately find a player who can fix your biggest problem that you had. So I think that Texas is more than equipped to be able to win the SEC this year. Plus, they got an easy schedule as compared to teams like Georgia and Alabama. They play a lot of average or below average SEC teams this year. They got to play Mississippi State, Florida, Arkansas on the road, and Vanderbilt. Those are all guaranteed wins for them. Now, their out-of-conference matchups, we don't even want to talk about that. Their out-of-conference is embarrassing. Outside of Michigan, there's nobody they should lose to out-of-conference. I think they play Colorado State week 1, and then the University of Louisiana Monroe right after that, a few weeks after that. So, out-of-conference and their conference schedule, for the most part, is not that difficult. Now, their toughest games, the games that actually could go either way for them, you're going on the road to Ann Arbor to play Michigan. You should beat Michigan. I don't care if you're playing in a hostile environment. Michigan is not that good this year, and they lose a lot of production. They're going to have a new coaching staff in place. Like, Texas should be able to handle Michigan. If you can go on the road and win in Tuscaloosa, you can win at Michigan. Oklahoma, we know that game can go either way. I think that Oklahoma is just as good as what Texas is coming into this season. You got Georgia, Kentucky, A&M. Realistically, I could see Texas going 12-0. You got more of your tougher games at home. Okay, the only tough road games you have are Michigan and A&M, and you can win those games because those teams aren't as good as you. And your home games against Georgia, you can be able to win that one. In Kentucky, you should be able to win that one also. Now, Oklahoma, that's a neutral site game, but, that game's always a toss-up. Really, the Oklahoma game is the only one that I really think you have a legit shot to lose outside of Georgia. Now, the floor, what if everything goes wrong for Texas? What's the worst case scenario for the Longhorns this season? I see it being 9-3. Okay, let's say you go on the road and you get beat by Michigan. Then you lose again to Oklahoma. Then you end up dropping one to either Georgia, Kentucky, or Texas A&M. That's how you get your 3 losses right there. But even with 3 losses, with how tough the SEC is and how oversaturated this conference has become, you can still get into the playoffs as a 3-loss team. So either way, Texas is in a great position to not just win the SEC with how favorable of a schedule they have, but also due to how good they are, the talent that they have in place, how well they recruited. This is a team that's more than prepared for the toughest conference in college football. But for them to get exposed, that they would need a lot of things to go right or a lot of things to go left. And I just don't see that happening. I think Steve Sarkisian has proven that he is a really good coach. And, he's going to do what it takes to be able to put Texas in the right position to win. They've been doing really good in recruiting. They've been crushing it in the portal. If you just think that Texas ain't good just because they've been playing in the Big 12, they're not going to be ready for the SEC. Like, you need to go do some more homework on Texas, because this school has always been good enough to win in any conference that they play in, rather it be the Big 10, the SEC, whoever. If you tell Texas you want to play some football, they can beat you anytime, any place, as long as they got some elite coaching. The last thing I want to get into before we end this episode is this. I want to give you guys a few quarterbacks in the SEC that are going to explode and break out during the 2024 college football season. The first guy I want to start off with is LSU gunslinger Gunnar Nussmeier, no pun intended. He doesn't have a lot of experience. He's only played in a handful of games, but the games that I have seen of Gunnar Nussmeier, this dude has been really impressive. And I didn't really too much watch his bowl game, but I definitely remember when he came in not too long ago in the SEC championship game against Georgia, and he was lining that defense up. And it doesn't matter if Georgia was up a lot of points and they were playing not to give up a lot of big plays. Like, listen, anytime you have the kind of performance that Gunnar Nussmeier had against Georgia, you're stamped. It's hard to have the kind of game that he had against that Georgia defense, no matter if they're playing a style of defense that's, going to make it easier for you to generate a lot of yards. Like, I was really impressed with what Gunnar Nussmeier did in that SEC championship in replace of Jaden Daniels. And he has one of the strongest arms in college football, too. So with the wide receiving core that he's going to have around him, a top 10 offensive line coming into this year, I see him as a dark horse Heisman contender. Not a lot of people are mentioning Gunnar Nussmeier's name when it comes to the Heisman conversation, but he definitely could end up being a finalist if everything goes right for LSU this year. Next up, Brock Vandagriff. This is one of the biggest transfers in the SEC this year in terms of who could have a big impact on the playoff picture in this conference, because Kentucky is good enough to be a playoff team. They're good in the trenches on the offensive line and defensive line. They got good receivers. Dane Key, Barry Brown, both of those dudes were highly touted when they were coming out of high school, and they were held back by disappointing quarterback play that you received from Devin Leary last year. Kentucky's one of those teams that they don't find good quarterbacks in recruiting. They get them via the portal. You hit on Will Levis, but you whiffed on Devin Leary. Brock Vandagriff, I think, is going to be a huge hit for them. He has spent the last couple of years at Georgia on their bench. He was really sought after when he was coming out of high school. He has a really good arm. I don't think he's the most athletic guy in the world, but he does have enough where you do have to account for his mobility. And if he can end up being an upgrade from Devin Leary and he ends up living up to his potential that he had coming out of high school, Kentucky is a really scary team because they have everything that you need to win in this conference. Everybody says you got to win in the trenches if you want to win. They're going to have good trench play. They're going to have a good defense. And they got a new OC who I think can be an upgrade from Liam Cohen. He comes from Boise State. We always know that Kentucky always has good running back play, but they never really have consistently good quarterback play. Even that year when they won 10 games with Chris Rod and who was it? It was Terry Wilson at quarterback. Terry Wilson wasn't that good. You know, he was good running the football, but his throwing ability was less to be desired. Well, Brock Vandagriff, this may be the most talented quarterback that you've ever had in the history of your program. You've never had a quarterback that's had the ability to throw the football that Brock Vandagriff has. Now, I know that this is a lot for a dude who hasn't really proven much, but from what I've seen out of him in high school and the few glimpses of him in the spring game, like this dude can really spin it with the best of them. And if he ends up panning out, look out SEC, because Kentucky definitely is going to be in the running for the SEC championship. That's how good this team could be if Brock Vandagriff plays up to his potential. And I think that he's going to have a breakout year, and we could see Kentucky being a 9-win team. Connor Wigman, he's entering his third season at Texas A&M. And some of you guys may say that he's already broken out, but I can't say that he has, because we haven't really seen a good amount of him. He only played in a handful of games last season before his year got cut short due to an injury that he sustained. But against my Hurricanes, he was lighting us up. And yeah, Texas A&M lost that game, but he was really impressive. He's really accurate. He always looks pretty cool, calm, and collected under pressure. I think that he throws a really good deep ball, and he has potential to be a future first-round pick in the NFL. I've talked to a scout that said that he really likes Connor Wigman's film, the little bit that he has up. But Connor Wigman, under Mike Elko, you know, he could really go off, and he could be another quarterback like Brock Vandagriff who could have a huge impact on the college football playoff picture. Because imagine if Connor Wigman ends up panning out and he lives up to his potential. Because remember, when he ended up signing with Texas A&M on early National Signing Day, Jimbo Fisher considered him to be the best quarterback in the nation. And I promise you, they could have gotten any quarterback that they wanted that year with the amount of money that they were spending on that recruiting class. And from what we've seen out of Connor Wigman so far, like, this dude actually is pretty talented. For Texas A&M, if this dude continues to play as well as what he's had, and he gets better and builds on what he's done, Texas A&M definitely could not only win the SEC, but they could do some damage in the playoffs. This is one of the best rosters in America. This is a top 10 roster at worst going into this year. The only question is, how good is this offensive line going to be? Now, if the offensive line shows up along with Connor Wigman, they definitely are going to have a say in the SEC championship race. So Connor Wigman is another quarterback that I think is going to break out this season. Nico Imaviava. Ooh, isn't that a fun name to pronounce? Once you finally learn how to pronounce it, you always want to say it. Nico Imaviava. I just love saying the name, and I love watching this dude play. I watched his debut against Iowa in the Cheez-Its Bowl, I believe it was, and he was carving that defense up. Think of Trevor Lawrence, but Hawaiian, more athletic, and with a better physique. That's what you get with Nico Imaviava. They were flying this dude out on recruiting visits on a private jet. You don't get that luxury if you aren't that good. And I believe that Nico Imaviava is going to be better than the quarterback play that they've gotten the last 2 years out of Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker. And Hendon Hooker should have won Heisman that year. Okay, we all know that. I don't even want to talk about it, man. But Nico Imaviava, with his mobility, it gives him more upside than Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker, because although those dudes could run, they don't have the kind of wheels that Nico has. And he also has a stronger arm than Hendon Hooker. He doesn't have the arm or the rifle that Joe Milton has, but he can sling that ball with the best of them. And with the wide receivers that Tennessee has going into this year, they didn't really have that last year. They had some injuries and they weren't really deep at that position. They're deep at wideout this year. And they're going to have a really good offensive line. So with everything that Nico has in place, he definitely has a really good chance of being able to win the Heisman. And he was the second-rated quarterback coming out of that 2023 class right behind Arch Manning. And some people will argue that he was the best quarterback in that recruiting cycle, and Arch Manning only got that number one label because of his last name. So I'm expecting big things out of Nico Iamaleava, and I think that he's going to put up some huge numbers this season for the Vols. Jackson Arnold, right behind Nico Iamaleava in that 2023 recruiting cycle. He wasn't too far off. He was a top 5 rated quarterback. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year. His final year in high school, he also won the Elite 11 camp as well. He had an up and down debut in that bowl game against Arizona. And I put money on Arizona to win that game, but he was making me a little bit nervous because the first quarter, he didn't look good. But in the second and third quarters, he really started to heat up. He got settled in. And once he really started to cook, you really started to see the kind of damage and why he was rated as high as what he was coming out of high school, because he has really good mobility, a really good arm. Think Johnny Manziel, but times 100 everything. That's what you get in Jackson Arnold. With what Oklahoma has at wide receiver, Gavin Sawchuk at running back, if that offensive line plays well, he's going to be a huge reason why Oklahoma wins this conference. Because I've been saying it all offseason that people are severely underestimating Oklahoma. Most people have them at a 7, 8-win team. They, to me, are a 9-win team and better if Jackson Arnold ends up blowing up this year like how I believe he will. The arm strength is there. He has really good mobility. As long as his offensive line can play well, expect him to put up huge numbers. Lenore Sellers. Now, I know a lot of you guys don't know about Lenore Sellers because he doesn't have as much clout as what Jackson Arnold and Nico Iamaleava have, because he was a 3-star recruit, but he was a big pickup for South Carolina, big in-state recruit. He also has really fantastic physical traits, great athleticism. This dude runs like 4.4 at 240-something pounds. And I don't want to call him an Anthony Richardson clone, but he looks pretty damn close to one. Incredible arm strength. I mean, this dude threw some damn missiles in the spring game. And when this dude gets up in the open field, good luck trying to tackle him if you're a defensive back, because I've seen a few glimpses of Lenore Sellers running the ball, and it's just been downright scary, man. There was a run that he had against Vanderbilt when he just completely just ran over a dude like Marshawn Lynch 2013 style, just put that shoulder down and bah! And I was just like, damn, this is what South Carolina has at quarterback this year. Like, the thing with Lenore Sellers is that you don't know how good he's going to be year one. Okay, it's just like with South Carolina, their offensive line is a little shaky, and he's not going to be throwing to the amount of talent at wide receiver that Nico and Jackson Arnold are. But if he ends up panning out, South Carolina could be a dangerous team this year with Lenore Sellers, man. He has the kind of skill set that could single-handedly win games for them. The offensive line, even if it's boo-boo again this year, he has the athleticism where he can go for 150 on the ground. He can also make like 80, 70-yard touchdown throws. And they got a wide receiver that could be in the Olympics this year. And he's like 6'5", running 4.4 himself. He's a freak. But Lenore Sellers, man, look out for him this season. Not a lot of people are mentioning this dude, but if he ends up panning out, Shane Beamer, I think that the hot seat talk starts to die down a little bit for him, and South Carolina gets the 6 wins easily, because my only question really is the offensive line and Lenore Sellers. Even though I believe in him, there's no guarantee that he's going to pan out, but I like this dude's game. He also has a really good football IQ. He has a high GPA, so he stays in the books. So I'm expecting big things out of Lenore Sellers. if you are looking for any quarterback from this list who nobody is talking about, who could be a dark horse Heisman contender, definitely look at Lenore Sellers, man, because he has that kind of skill set with that athleticism and the kind of frame that he has. He could end up being one of the most dominant quarterbacks in this conference this season, depending on how good he ends up coming along in his second year with the program. But these are my 6 breakout quarterbacks to watch in the SEC for the 2024 college football season. Let me know if there's a guy that I missed or a guy that got left off that you feel should be on here. And this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast / JT Sports Live. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we're not just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find every episode in audio format on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you have a question that you would like answered on a future episode, you can send them in the DMs on Instagram or on X. You can find us on X at JT_Sports_ and on Instagram at JT_Sports_. Also, remember that if you want to watch our individual team-by-team, game-by-game record predictions for college football, NFL, we're going to be doing them on Instagram and TikTok. Our TikTok is JT_Sports_. Our Instagram is JT_Sports_. So follow us there. And shout out to everybody in the chat, man. Shout out to my guy, Shadowban, Robert Turner. Again, he says, good stuff, JT. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Shout out to my guy, Sean Ackridge, OG subscriber, man. Shout out to everybody that's been tuned in. And I see you guys tomorrow. For all my college football fans out there, we're going to be going live. Same time, 6:45 p.m. Eastern time with my guy, College Football with Sam. We're going to be talking Big Ten, him drinking the Michigan Kool-Aid. Like, my dude, College Football with Sam, man, he's been pumping out some incredible content. But when I watched his Big Ten record predictions and he had Michigan going 14-0, losing to Georgia in the national championship, like, man, I couldn't believe it. I was like, people talking about me sipping on the Miami Hurricanes Kool-Aid. He got Michigan going 14-0, running the table on everybody, beating Ohio State for a 4th straight time. Sheesh. But yeah, make sure that you guys tune in for tomorrow.